Jake's garage sat at the edge of a quiet Texas town, its faded sign creaking softly in the warm evening breeze. Inside, the smell of oil and metal filled the air. As he wiped his hands on a worn rag, glancing at the clock, it was past closing time. But going home early wasn't an option. Bills stacked up on the small desk in the corner, and every extra hour meant a better chance of keeping things steady. For his young son Ethan, the boy was everything to him. The reason he pushed through long days and aching muscles without complaint. Just as Jake was about to shut off the lights, a sputtering engine echoed outside. He stepped out and saw an old sedan, struggling to stay alive before finally dying near his garage entrance. Behind the wheel was an elderly woman, her expression a mix of worry and exhaustion. Jake approached calmly, offering a reassuring smile. "Evening, ma'am. Looks like you've had some trouble," he said gently. She nodded, explaining that she was passing through town when the car suddenly gave up. Her voice trembled slightly, not just from the breakdown, but from uncertainty about what would come next. Jake popped the hood and began inspecting the engine under the dim shop light. Years of experience told him it wasn't a major issue, just a failing fuel pump and a few worn-out components. Fixable but not cheap for someone on a tight budget. As he worked, the woman hesitated before asking how much it might cost. Jake paused for a moment, glancing at her tired face, and the way she clutched her purse, like it held her last bit of security. He didn't need her to say more. He understood. "Let me take care of it." Jake replied simply, his tone steady. The woman looked surprised, insisting she would try to pay whatever she could. But Jake shook his head and got back to work, focusing on the repair with quiet determination. Time slipped by as he replaced parts, tightened bolts, and tested the engine. Despite the late hour and his own fatigue, he didn't rush. He made sure everything was done right. Knowing she had a long road ahead, after nearly an hour, Jake stepped back and turned the key. The engine roared to life smoothly, a clear sign the problem was solved. The woman's eyes filled with relief as she listened to the steady hum. She reached into her purse, pulling out a small amount of cash, but Jake gently raised his hand. "No charge," he said with a warm smile. "Just make sure you get where you're going safely." Tears welled up in her eyes as she thanked him, her voice full of gratitude. Before leaving, she looked at him, as if trying to remember every detail about the man who had helped her without asking for anything in return. Jake simply nodded, watching as she drove away into the night. He didn't think much of it afterward. To him, it was just the right thing to do. But as he locked up his garage and headed home to his son, he had no idea that this small act of kindness was about to change his life in ways he could never have predicted. The next morning began like any other for Jake, with the soft sound of his son Ethan getting ready for school and the faint hum of traffic outside their small home. Jake packed a simple lunch for Ethan, trying to ignore the same worries that followed him every day. Rent bills and the uncertainty of keeping his garage running. After dropping Ethan off, he returned to work, expecting another long day of routine repairs. But just as he unlocked the garage door, his phone rang, the unfamiliar number, making him hesitate for a moment before answering. "Hello, this is Jake," he said, his voice steady but curious. On the other end, a calm, confident woman introduced herself as Olivia Carter, CEO of a major automotive company based in New York. Jake frowned slightly, thinking it might be a prank. But her tone was too composed to dismiss. She continued, explaining that her mother had been stranded the previous evening and had told her everything about the mechanic who fixed her car without charging a single dollar. Jake stood silently, surprised that such a simple act had reached someone so important. Olivia's voice softened as she spoke about how much that kindness meant. She explained that her company had been searching for someone trustworthy to lead a new automotive service division, someone who understood not just machines, but people. "My mother said you didn't hesitate to help her," she said. "That's exactly the kind of person I want representing my company." Jake leaned against the workbench, trying to process what he was hearing. Opportunities like this didn't come to people like him, not out of nowhere still. Doubt crept in. Jake glanced around his modest garage, at the old tools and the worn-out equipment he had relied on for years. "Ma'am, I'm just a small-town mechanic," he replied honestly. "I don't have big company experience." There was a brief pause before Olivia responded with quiet confidence. "What you have is far more valuable," she said. "Skill, integrity, and heart. The rest can be learned." She then outlined the offer: a leadership position relocation, support and a salary that was far beyond anything Jake had ever imagined earning. His grip tightened on the phone as he listened, his mind racing with thoughts of Ethan's future. Better schools, a stable home, and a chance to give his son the life he had always wished for him. It felt unreal, almost too good to be true. Yet something about Olivia's sincerity made it feel genuine. Jake took a deep breath, thinking about the long nights, the struggles and the small choices that had defined his life. Helping that elderly woman hadn't been about reward. It was simply who he was. And now somehow that choice had opened a door he never knew existed. I'd be honored, he finally said, his voice filled with both disbelief and gratitude. After the call ended, Jake stood there in silence, the quiet garage suddenly feeling different. When he picked Ethan up from school later that day, he knelt down and held his son tightly, a rare smile spreading across his face. "Things are going to change for us, buddy," he said softly in that moment. Jake realized that kindness doesn't just help others, it has a way of coming back when you least expect it, shaping your future in ways you could never plan.